Benjamin Netanyahu's clear and stated aim since the start of this conflict, which of course started when Hamas launched its terror raids in Israel, that Hamas cannot remain in its position running Gaza. While it still conducts its operations there, Israel won't be satisfied. Joe Biden announced yesterday, as he stood in the Rose Garden to talk about this ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah, that there are more talks due on Gaza in the coming days. A renewed push in his last sort of month and a half in office, but it's very difficult to see that without Israel really wanting a peace deal at this stage, how Joe Biden will come close to achieving that.
So then, after that agreed ceasefire, we reported that live here on the program yesterday between Hezbollah and Israel. It came into force in the early hours. Thousands of people now returning to southern Lebanon, and we can talk to Oliver Marsden, who's in Beirut, writing for the Times. Hello to you, Oliver.
Hi, good afternoon.
Oliver, tell me what is happening there in Lebanon. We've seen reports of relief. We've seen some reports of celebration among those who are greeting the ceasefire as a victory for Hezbollah, despite that destruction and the losses inflicted by Israel. What is going on today?
Well, right now, there are over 1.2 million people displaced here internally in Lebanon, according to the International Organization of Migration. So a lot of these people have now hit the road, and the ones that were displaced and were sheltering in Beirut, they've hit the road, they're heading south, they're heading back to the Dahieh, the southern suburbs of Beirut, and they just want to go home after months and months of being forced from their homes and this sort of continuous Israeli bombardment. I went down to the Dahieh today, the southern suburbs, and everywhere you look, there was destruction on every street corner, down every alley. There were just empty spaces where apartment blocks used to be, and now it was rubble and twisted metal and ash and smoke still rising, because we had a huge wave of airstrikes yesterday, right up until about 4 a.m. 4 a.m. local time, just before that ceasefire came into effect. So people were returning homes. As you mentioned earlier, there was some celebration. I saw young men firing AK-47s into the air. I saw people posing for pictures, holding up, V signs for victory with their hands. And many people were returning to what used to be their homes, and now there's nothing left. So there was a mixture of celebration and sadness and almost despair in what had happened to not only the capital, but to their homes and to the country in general.
You paint that picture very vividly, Oliver. What about the Lebanese military? Are they moving into the area? They'll be part of a peacekeeping operation, if I can use that phrase.
Yes, so this ceasefire, one of the main parts of it hinges on the Lebanese armed forces moving south and patrolling this border area between, in the south of Lebanon, between Lebanon and northern Israel. Today, I saw trucks on the move, heading south, full of soldiers. They were stuck in the traffic moving south with these families. I saw soldiers waving at children in their cars. There has been a real push to bolster the Lebanese armed forces. The caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati, he went to Paris last month to Emmanuel Macron's forum on Lebanon, and they managed to secure about $1 billion in aid. Only 200 million of that has been ring-fenced for the Lebanese army. So I'm not sure if that's quite enough to fill the gap. This country has gone through a raft of economic woes. There was the port explosion in 2020. And so the Lebanese armed forces is weak, but I think many people here are hoping that finances will come from the Gulf states, from America. The UK is a very big player in bolstering the Lebanese armed forces and providing them with arms and equipment, with Land Rovers, for example. So I think this ceasefire is very much contingent on the Lebanese armed forces moving south, patrolling that southern border and keeping Hezbollah north of the Litani River and hopefully keeping the peace.
All right, Oliver Marsden for the Times there, live in Beirut. Thank you. Now let's cross to the USA and speak to Alistair Dawber, who is there in Washington. Alistair, hello.
Hi, John.
Welcome back to the show, Alistair. So Joe Biden and his administration were active, weren't they, in negotiating the Lebanon ceasefire, and the USA will be part of monitoring what happens now. But Joe Biden's greater goal is an end to the conflicts in Gaza, the conflict with the Palestinian militants of Hamas, and after the return of Israel and Jewish hostages. And that still looks such a faint and distant hope, Alistair, doesn't it?
It really does. And if you think that, we're only now, I think it's 55 days from Joe Biden giving up power, handing the White House to Donald Trump, he has spent most of the last year really trying to figure out a way of bringing an end to the war in Gaza, getting the hostages being held by Hamas. There are about 63 people still alive and being held, and getting vital aid, food and medical supplies to the ordinary Palestinian people in Gaza. That's been Joe Biden's priority in the Middle East for at least the last 9, 10, 11, even 12 months. It doesn't really look as though he will get to the end of his term and get close to achieving that.
Yes, I mean, Hamas have not released the hostages, and Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli leadership, they won't agree to withdraw from Gaza. I mean, just the opposite. Yesterday, announcing the ceasefire, the Israeli leader, well, he declared his aim to be the total destruction of Hamas, Alistair.
Yeah, it's been Benjamin Netanyahu's clear and stated aim since the start of this conflict, which of course started when Hamas launched its terror raids in Israel, that Hamas cannot remain in its position running Gaza. While it still conducts its operations there, Israel won't be satisfied. Joe Biden announced yesterday, as he stood in the Rose Garden to talk about this ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah, that there are more talks due on Gaza in the coming days. A renewed push in his last sort of month and a half in office, but it's very difficult to see that without Israel really wanting a peace deal at this stage, how Joe Biden will come close to achieving that.
Yeah, I mean, Biden, he has something just over 50 odd days left. He's going to end this term with no breakthrough, still less any real progress towards any kind of two-state solution. That seems fanciful. And then Alistair, the baton passes to Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I think Joe Biden inherited a sort of unexpectedly useful position in the Middle East when he came into power 4 years ago. The Abraham Accords, these unilateral deals between Israel and a number of previously hostile Middle Eastern states, allowed Joe Biden really to concentrate on different parts of his foreign policy agenda, not least China and the Indo-Pacific. But of course, on October the 7th last year, all that changed, and Joe Biden, like many of his predecessors, got dragged back to the Middle East. Now, one fear he will have is that his legacy is on the line, and Donald Trump is back in office in about 6 weeks' time. Were the peace deal to be signed or agreed for Gaza after that, were the medical vital supplies be allowed into Gaza for the Palestinian people after Trump returns to office, I think Donald Trump will then try and present himself as the great peacemaker and someone that his foreign policy methods may not be particularly traditional, but he will say they'll be very effective.
Alistair Dawber in Washington, thank you.